Welcome to Nurses with Voices, the podcast where we amplify the voices of nurses everywhere. I'm your host, Dr. Lendra James, DNP-RN, and I am thrilled to go on this podcast journey with you. Through this podcast, we aim to educate, empower, and inspire nurses at every stage of their careers. Whether you're a novice nurse navigating the challenges of bedside care, an experienced clinician looking to advance in your field, or dreaming of becoming a nurse entrepreneur, Nurses with Voices is here for you. Together, we'll explore the triumphs, struggles, and countless opportunities that come with being a nurse. So tune in, subscribe, and let your voice be heard, because here at Nurses with Voices, every nurse has a story worth sharing, and every nurse voice deserves to be amplified. Welcome back to another episode of Nurses with Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Lendra James, DNP-RN. And recently, we had an enlightening conversation with Dr. Dawn Morris, where we delved into the serious issue of workplace bullying and discrimination and how they significantly contribute to burnout among healthcare professionals. Building on that discussion, today we are exploring another critical aspect, combating that burnout, right? And looking at the nervous system and the nervous system regulation. So I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Cindy Kruse, founder of Kruse Into You. She is a dedicated nurse and entrepreneur who owns a business focused on helping healthcare professionals overcome burnout through innovative tech, right? In nervous system regulation. So let's dive into how we can better manage stress and support our well-being and this demanding world of healthcare, right? So Cindy, welcome, and thank you for being a guest on our show today.
Oh,
Can you tell the listeners, tell us a little bit about your journey, what inspired you to start your business, really focused on the nervous system, right? Regulation for healthcare professionals.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to share this. It really has become a passion of mine. I am a pediatric ICU nurse now 28 years. And when I say that, people are like, what? And I still love it. And that's the key, is still loving it, because 3 years ago, that was not the case. And that's where the journey began, really. I was very, very much burnt out. And it got to the point where I knew that if I got to where I wasn't loving what I was doing anymore, the impact wouldn't be the same. And it was time to do something else. But I didn't know what. I had been on the journey where I was a pediatric, just a general pediatric nurse, and then an ICU nurse, and then I was a traveling nurse for a while. And I came up to the crossroads of going back to school, or I continued to travel, and then really just loved being bedside nurse. And I was like, okay, this is where I kind of compartmentalized myself. And I was like, this is where I'm going to die, at the bedside. And that's where it got to that point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know what else to do. I found a mentor. And, I feel like as nurses, sometimes we are very much into, I got it. I can help, because we were put on this earth to heal others, right? But we never really look into ourselves. And I feel like we get lost in that journey. And that's kind of where I was. So I found a mentor who really spoke to me, and that was her guidance. And she was more of an entrepreneur. And I took her lessons and then adapted it to nursing, because it was so needed. And it was that journey of cruising back into who you were born to be. And that's where Kruse Into You coaching was created. And it really truly is, if you desire change and long-term transformational change, whatever that may be, in professional, in private, in relationships, there has to be this trifecta for change. And one of the three prongs is nervous system regulation. The only way you have long-term transformational change is when there's safety in the body. And I feel like as nursing professionals or healthcare professionals, we have gotten so accustomed to disconnecting from our body as a protective mechanism, because if we don't think about things and we don't feel things, then it doesn't affect us, or we kind of just take it and judge it down. So years and years and years of doing that, it came to the realization that there was all this stored trauma, and that gets stored in your cells in your body. And the only way to rid that is to reconnect to your body. And this is where this nervous system love, that I call it, and nervous system regulation really comes into play, because now I do it. I have a system. I have like a steps that I do prior going into work. I have things that when I get activated, and that's the beauty of it, is now the awareness of when my energy and my vibration falls to where I don't want it to be. Like when you ask yourself the question, how many hours of the day do you live feeling the way you want to feel?
Right.
How many of us can honestly say that we live in happiness and contentment and satiated in our lives? Not many. Most of us have worry, because of the things that we see, and especially in, acute care or in the hospital settings, you are inundated with all this trauma that kind of gets embedded. And this is just a way in order to recognize it and then begin the process of healing it.
Right, right. You've made some great points, and I want to unpack that for the listeners. And so, number one, when you talk about the mentorship, right,
Mhm.
and that is, anyone who follows me know that mentorship to me is just such is key in being productive and really elevating and developing yourself personally and professionally. And it's
Mhm.
something that if you don't have, and I think personally for me, especially coming from someone who never really had mentorship, and once I started to invest in myself and seek mentorship, it was a game changer for me. And so that's the importance of how mentorship can really help you in so many aspects of your life. And when you talk about trauma, I completely agree with you 100%. Think about how we as healthcare professionals, we deal with medical emergencies, right? Code blues for my healthcare professionals that are listening, right? You could be in the ER, or even if you're on the nursing units and, a patient dies, right? We code the patient. We were just in a very traumatic experience and this patient didn't make it, right? And now what do we have to do? We have to take that trauma in, and we have to go right into our next patient's room and act like nothing ever happened. So we become very skilled at really burying how we actually really feel, right? And to your point, it's traumatic and we just suppress it. So I love where you're going with this. And I guess my next question would be, how does the nervous system regulation work, and why is it particularly effective in addressing burnout among healthcare professionals?
Um, Again, most of us, and we probably don't even realize, are living, our nervous system. We have our sympathetic state and our parasympathetic state. So sympathetic is your fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And then your parasympathetic state is your restorative state. It's your calm state. From our primitive brains and our caveman days, our brain is wired for survival. Our brain is wired to look for what's wrong, where's that saber-toothed tiger that's going to eat me hiding. So our brains are wired for that. So once that gets activated, it sends the same responses in our body, with increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. Your blood starts shunting from your gut to your vital organs to get you to be able to run and fight or hide. So and living in that is higher cortisol levels. Higher cortisol levels, what does that lead to? Higher blood pressure. And if we don't get back from that sympathetic state back to a restorative, and we need that. So it's important because it keeps us alive. So we do need that. Nobody lives in bliss all the time. You need that sympathetic state, and then once you drop down, but you have to come back down into that parasympathetic state, so your prefrontal cortex comes back online, and you're open and expansive, and then you're in, like I said, back in that restorative state. So what happens is doing things like tapping. We go through an entire tapping sequence with my clients. We meditate. We do deep breathing. I now am trying to implement in my hospital just it's the 90-second solution. We're calling it the 90-second solution, where it's 4-7-8 breathing for 4 rounds of 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 7 seconds, and you breathe out with your teeth behind your tongue behind your teeth for 8 seconds. And that triggers your brain to calm down, to bring yourself back into that parasympathetic state. So then you're able to continue, doing what you're doing. And it is what it does is it's beautiful because it rejuvenates your energetics. And we're all spiritual beings, right? Living in this human experience. And if my energy is elevated and activated, and now I'm going into a patient's room that is already at a high stress level, you have this mesh now, and there's already a depletion in immunity from being ill, and there's just no room for healing there. So that's one thing that I've noticed that's been beautiful, especially in my unit with my patients is, and I'm teaching this to parents, which is just been spectacular, because if I come in regulated, the patient is regulated, the parents are regulated, and it just creates this beautiful space for healing. So what it does for nurses is once you're in that regulated state, it really is amazing how everything else falls into place. Have you ever noticed when you're angry and at something, and then the next thing goes wrong, and the next thing goes wrong, and the next thing goes wrong, and you just
Yeah,
spiral, and then
it's
it's
a
like,
spiral.
okay, yeah, and it really is just a spiral. And that's what I'm thinking that I've noticed is all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling how I want to feel. What do I do? Stop and breathe. There's so many different things you can do. Tongue rolling, you can do um, dry brushing. So I have so many different techniques for like on demand, and I love to call they're embodied practices. I don't like to say tools because none of us are broken. When you say a tool, it means that you're trying to fix something. None of us are broken. We are all just in the muck of things. And once you find that clarity, it really does open the space to rejuvenate your heart space for the impact that you were put on this earth to fulfill, right? And I feel like we all have, nursing, you go into the profession mostly because you have a calling to help others heal. And when healing just exponentially happens when it comes from a regulated state to a regulated state.
So, if a lot of times, a lot of what you're saying, how can so what would you say you would say for some common signs of burnout, right? That healthcare professionals should be aware of, and because you talked about how a lot of times we have to something happens and then it just spirals and then something else happens, right? And these are those little small things that also contributes to burnout in our in what we do, right? Because now we're just having bad days all the time. And what is something that you would say healthcare professionals should be aware of, and how can they begin to address these signs using your methods? I know you talked about breathing, but maybe go into a little deeper about what your program really involves so that people can really understand, like, why would they contact Kruse Into You, right? If they want to use using your methods.
And that's a beautiful, beautiful question. And that's where it like sets my heart on fire, because the I love to do one-on-one coaching. I love to do group coaching, but my mega program is called Nurture the Nurse, and it's a journey from registered nurse to regulated nurse. And it truly is a journey because it is actually going very introspective and looking at past trauma. And we go back into when, subconscious mind versus conscious mind. Your subconscious mind is formed from third trimester in utero to 7 years old. It's a camera turned on. It's that bottom part of the iceberg, the biggest part that we sometimes aren't even aware of. And that camera's turned on 24/7, and we're just recording everything. And most of us tack on, and it will always be that way. So things that were said to you, then you take and our meaning makers make meaning of it, and then we bury it as a belief. And then that belief, most of the time, is a limiting belief, or it manifests, or we because our bodies are made for survival, we actually create adaptive behaviors for those traumas as a response, and then they ultimately become maladaptive behaviors. So we in the program go, we as we heal our inner child, we also visualize and focus on our future. So it's a beautiful, we actually go through, like I said, and heal the inner child, and then visualizations of our 85-year-old self. And we're the conduit as you go forward. So you're guided by your vision with your healed child. And it's just a beautiful way to really truly live in the moment, which I feel like a lot of us, like, we weren't put on this earth to collect a pile of things. We were put on this earth for a purpose. And once you find your purpose, then the rest of it just becomes easy. And there's, and that's where I think a lot of us, and everybody I think we need to also just, everybody has a trauma response. Everybody is a walking trauma response. If you're living, if you're breathing, you are a trauma response. And it doesn't have to be something malicious. It doesn't have to be big T trauma. It can merely be, I walked on the playground when I was 6 years old and two girls turned away from me and it made me feel like I didn't belong. And that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And then, or how many times have our parents been like, kids are meant to be heard and not see, or seen and not heard, and
Uh-huh.
you quiet your voice, and then all of a sudden you wonder why you can't go live on a podcast, or you can't, you don't speak up, or you're in a relationship that you're unhappy in. Like, it just really affects everything, not just your personal life but your professional life, and then they kind of drip back and forth. um so to your, I want to say that there was an original part to that question before I got so excited about the whole
No,
program.
no, this is no, you're
um, I was like,
this is
yeah,
everything you're saying. It's like you're completely right. I mean, I'm going to let you go back to the original part of the question, but to your point, mindset shifts are so important, especially when you're as you develop, right? And that was something that I learned through coaching and mentoring, is the mindset set shifts. And you definitely hit a relatable topic when you talked about going back into your childhood self, and that's something that was a part of one of my programs that I took as a mentee.
oh,
And
nice.
that actually it does help you to have a breakthrough. You gave great examples, when you said, like, what should your parents do, your kids are to be seen and not heard. That is a perfect example of what parents did and what people, what happened in, at least in my era growing up, like, not to date myself here, but that is, it helps you suppress your voice. And having that type of coaching, and it really helps you with that mindset shift. And we don't realize how a lot of our traumas come from when we were 8 years old or 10 years old. And whether it was, and it doesn't have to be necessarily something that was, you know, I mean,
Completely
people have
traumatic.
their, yeah, completely traumatic. Exactly. It could just be those
It doesn't
things
have to be
that,
that trauma. It can really
Right,
just,
exactly. So you made you make a huge point there, and mindset shifts are completely important, and that's something that we try to teach in, well, not try, that we teach in the mentorship program as well, because a lot of times people just want to get from, where they are, and they want to get right to the meat and potatoes of the business. But if you
mm,
don't shift your mindset, your business will not be successful, right? Because we haven't been taught, a lot of healthcare professionals, we haven't been taught certain things about business. We haven't been taught certain things about entrepreneurship. So going from working from in the traditional setting of nursing to going to be your own boss or doing something different, there's a mindset
being a
shift that needs
leader.
to occur. So, and if you're coming from burnout, especially, there's a huge mindset shift that
Yeah.
needs to occur. So that kind of goes back to what part of my original question was: what are some common signs of burnout that healthcare
Oh,
professionals should be aware of?
yeah. Not sleeping, um, waking, um, actually, I mean, breakouts in the skin. all of a sudden, so I don't, I'm a very big meditator, and I've been since my early 20s. I don't know if you follow or have heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he has actually produced a movie, and I like totally nerd out on the science of this, but he hosts these meditation retreats that are 7 to 10 days long, and he's been doing it for the last 12 years. He's a chiropractor who wound up actually healing his own spine by meditating 2 hours every day for 12 weeks on reconstructing his spine. He was in a cycling accident. And they actually just came out with a scientific evidence that people that meditate produce a protein called serpina 5 that doesn't allow spike proteins to enter the cell. Cancer, COVID, and dementia. They literally have changed the formation of a cancer cell in a petri dish. He has people like, I have a personal friend who went to 4 of his retreats and has cured her own cancer with just going within and quieting her mind, because what these elevated cortisol levels do from being in this constant elevated state of stress, it turns on genetic switches in the body. And I mean, what he says is almost 97% of all illnesses is environment and behavior.
That's huge.
So
That's
to be
huge.
able to say, you know what, I'm going to go within, close my eyes, breathe. And I know a lot of people are like, meditating is such woo woo, but now the scientific evidence is coming out to back it up that it actually is making a difference. And quieting the mind, visualizing what you want to see, because your mind only goes to what's familiar. And if your every day is, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to drink my coffee, I get out of bed the same side of the bed, I drink my coffee the same time, I scroll through, I think the same thoughts, I don't have enough money, I hate my job, all this traffic, well, you're in this repetitive cycle, and it's almost like there's no way out of it. But if you actually quiet your mind, focus your attention on, and this is what's been big with my patients and their families, is I explain to them this is the journey, and they don't need to focus on the breathing tube or the illness or the x-ray. They need to focus on, in 2 or 3 days, I'm going to be holding my child again, because we are merely in the path to their wellness. Like, doesn't that already feel better? Instead of, like I had a little infant, 3 week old with RSV that was intubated. And the nurse, unfortunately, when I came to the bedside, was stressed out. I mean, like I could feel her energy as I walked towards her. And I was like, how was your day? And she was like, it was actually horrible. I am 17 weeks postpartum. This is my first shift back, and they floated me to this unit, and I have an intubated baby. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. And I said to her, I told her how to do a visceral release in the car, to where she would literally just scream. Like, you let it all build and you scream in your elbow. It's one of the most amazing releases of such, like, I mean, this is like dig down deep stuff that gets let out. And I was like, please do something to release this energy before you go home to your baby, because your baby's not going to sleep all night long because your energy is so jacked up right now. And so play a loud song, dance, booger cry in the car, do whatever you need to get that out. Shaking, tapping, anything to get that out of your body, because that's where we store it. And I was like, has that baby's heart rate been 178 all day? And she was like, yeah, I don't know what's wrong. The baby's not dry, doesn't have a fever, blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
Your energy. Your
and
energy.
it's jacking up the baby's energy.
Yeah. Your energy.
Energy.
Yeah. Yep. I
So,
believe, I
yeah.
totally believe in energy and positive energy, negative energy. I personally, I really, really, truly do. I think everything you're saying is really, not only it's definitely relatable, and I'm sure it's relatable to a lot of healthcare professionals. And I'm wondering, what advice do you have for healthcare leaders and managers to support their staff in preventing this, burnout and negative energy, and promoting a healthier work environment for, especially for, using, building off the example that you just used, right, with the postpartum nurse coming back after 17 weeks.
Mhm. Um, it was beautiful to know the things that she needed at the moment. And that's what I teach in our somatic, in our like nervous system somatic work. Um, and just asking, like, I've been a nurse for 28 years. I've never had a leader come to me and pull me into the office and say, "How are you? Like, what do you need?" How simple. And not the, "Oh, hey, how are you? Fine. Okay, great," in passing, because
Right.
everybody's fine. Everybody's fine. I'm fine.
Right.
I'm fine. But you're dying on the inside.
Right.
So to
Right.
actually pause, like there's so much power in the pause and saying, like, what do you need? Are you okay? Have you had anything to drink? Have you had anything to eat? Have you gone to the bathroom?
Have you gone to the bathroom? Right. Right. Have you gone to the
Like,
bathroom?
I've become a
Mhm.
camel. I can store urine for days, and it's just like that's just not okay. And there's simple, simple things. And then to be able to say, you know what? You need a minute. Go take
Right.
5 minutes and breathe. Tap. Do whatever, and just know enough techniques to say. And like I said, this 90-second solution, I'm telling you, it works as a mother, it works as a wife. You know how many times it saved my husband? Where I'm like, just stop and breathe, girl. Stop and breathe. You know, because
What? So, who is your ideal audience? Like, who's your target audience?
I just love all humans. I love nurses. I really do love nurses. Um, my entrepreneurship journey, I sell vitamins to tired moms.
Uh,
And it's amazing. Like, this little sticker right here has 19 milligrams of caffeine, and it's through your skin, which is like another mind blowing thing. But it also has 5-HTP for serotonin support. Hi, my kids are like, "Where's the patch?" She doesn't have the patch on today. It's gonna be trouble. Like, to so yeah. With the coaching, I'm kind of venturing out right now. Like I said, my love is my nurses, because I have such, and because I work nights and I love nights and I'll never not work nights. Um, I love my baby nurses. I do. I love them. I feel like I'm like the fairy godmother at night. And I'm teaching this in little cohorts, and it's making a difference, which is huge. Instead of, and that's where they're like, "Oh, we need you to come work your magic in this room," and I'm like, "If you let me show you how." And they're
I
like,
love it. I love it. But you know what? It's things like this that when we talk about incorporating wellness into healthcare, right? And incorporating wellness programs, I should say, this is a wellness program that can be rolled out into your organization, and then think about other organizations that you could consult with and roll it out in their organization, seeing how building off of the progress that you have where you are now. Because it's important. And I think, and I talked about this in a previous episode as well, I think the engagement of employees is really important. And when employees feel that their organizations are fighting for them or are vested in their mindfulness or in their, stress relieving activities, and not just bringing pizza, right? Like, where the days of pizza parties are over, you know,
"Over."
we really want, again, mindfulness exercises, stress relievers, massages, what are you doing to help me debrief? And to your point, I think you made a great point when you talk about what nurse leaders can do, is really just taking a second and just pausing and actually asking me, am I okay? And not
Mhm.
just in passing. I think that's huge. And it is super, super, super important. So I definitely want to thank you for joining us today on our episode of Nurses with Voices. We're excited to learn from your expertise, and I definitely want to, hear more about how your impactful work is, really helping to support, your colleagues or our colleagues in healthcare. Is there, please let the audience and listeners know how they can reach you.
Yeah. Just kruseintoyou.com. So it's KRUSE, my last name, into you.com.
There
I'm
you
also
go.
on Instagram, Cindy Kruse09 on Facebook, and then Cindy_Kruse1 on Instagram.
All right, very good. Well, thank you so much. Well, there you have it, everyone. Until next time, make sure that you stay empowered, stay educated, and stay inspired. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Bye bye. Thank you.